musky rods, musky reels. You gotta have them to catch one of these things. I'm gonna walk you through how to select the right musky rod and the right reel. Okay, so it might seem like anything will work, but it's going to depend entirely on your physical stature and also what you're looking to do. So let's break down some of the musky rods and I'll walk you through what's going to be the best setup for how you fish and where you fish. So first thing we're going to notice when it comes to musky rods, I'm here at the shield rod section. We have 7-foot rods, we have 8-foot rods, we have 8'6" rods, we've got 9-foot rods, we got 9'6" shield rods. Some of the other brands go up, you got up to the 9s. Look at this pile of rods. Which one is right for you? So, first things first is going to be considering your physical stature. Not something that's talked about very often, but it's very meritorious. So, as we're musky fishing, our biggest goal is a quality figure eight, right? So if we're musky fishing the way we've been taught to, the way we need to be successful as possible, we need a high quality figure eight every single cast. So my first consideration is going to be looking at what kind of boat am I typically fishing out of, right? Are you in a flat boat where it's a metal boat or a flat boat that's low to the water? Are you on a boat that has high gunnels? That's going to influence your rod length choice right off the bat. Okay, so let's say that we're fishing out of a classic style of Lund that sits very high off the water. It's going to be important for us to select a longer rod length that compensates for that, right? Whereas on the flat boat, or say like a Tuffy or a boat that sits low to the water, you can get away with a shorter rod. Now, what I want to consider past that is the physicality. Okay, so if let's say, you know, you're of shorter stature, fishing out of a boat that is low to the water, a 9'6" telescoping rod might not be appropriate choice. You may not need this to competently do a big wide figure eight, right? But the 8'6" or the 9-foot might be appropriate. It's a decision that'll have to be made and done with forethought based upon the vessel you're fishing out of. So I always tend to err on the longest rod you can handle, you can store in your boat, and you can get in your boat. It's going to be the ticket for you. What I like about the Musky Shop shield rods, they're telescoping, right? This rod right here, that just went down to real small storage size. So you can get a big rod. Now, when it comes to selecting the biggest rod you can get that's appropriate for your stature and the boat you're fishing out of, I want to again err on the wider turning radius of figure eight. So, you know, what is this? This is the 8-footer. With the 8-foot model in a low boat or a flat boat, I'm still going to have a good turning radius in my figure eight, but I could get away with a bigger radius with the 9'6". So make a decision based on that. So really, it's not going to be a matter of do I need a 7-foot rod or a 9'6" rod. Your decision becomes, do I need a 9-footer or a 9'6", or do I need an 8'6" or a 9-footer, right? Your choices are narrowed on that gunnel height of your boat, how far you elevated off the float of the boat. What I like to say to people, to make it really simple, is I want a rod that no matter what, how I'm on the water, that when I come into my figure eight, it's providing a really good lazy figure eight. When I'm not paying attention, when I'm not dialed in, that this figure eight that I'm doing, right, I didn't see a fish, I'm not paying attention, that the length of the rod when I'm standing flat-footed is creating a nice turning radius and creating that depth change we're looking for in a great figure eight, right? So I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing small bends with the lower section of my back all day long to create that. The reason I'm erring on the longer rod length, right, is the choice. If you decide that your boat is appropriate for a 8'6" or a 9-foot rod, and you're of like middle physical stature, something of that nature, I'm always going to err on the longer rod because it's going to give you that extra length that we have when we're not thinking about a great figure eight. We come in, we do our mechanical eight where we're not paying attention. It's creating that wider turning radius and it's also gaining depth. So erring on that is what's going to be appropriate. Now that pretty much takes down the question of rod length as far as, you know, physical stature and things of that nature. It makes no sense, like I said, to go out in a John boat that you fish in a small river with a 9'6" rod, right? So that's the next consideration. What scenarios am I fishing in? So In an inland lake or a Canadian Shield Lake scenario, big rod that's appropriate for your physicality, and rods appropriate for the gunnel height or the height of your boat off the water, right? An argument could be made in deep V's that if you are fishing different positions in the boat, the argument can be made for people of the same stature that the guy in the front of the boat needs a longer rod than the guy in the back, just by the nature of the boat setting, right? So I'm factoring in how far am I setting off the water, and the mechanics of a really good figure eight is what's going to determine what's happening there. Back to the different fishing scenarios. If you're fishing out of a small John boat, right, something of this nature was the 7-footer, this might be all you can fit in the boat comfortably. You're dealing with limbs. You can't do a cast back over your head, right? We don't have room, right? Or we're fishing extremely shallow water. You might have to forego the capacity of the longer rod for a great figure eight for that rod selection. So think situationally as far as where you're fishing. Now, one of the big questions that happens with rods, and you know, you've got obviously the Shield rod. We stock Musky Innovations. We stock, we've got St. Croix. We have every brand you can think of Musky rods. Fenwick, we got them all. Is power, right? What power of rod do I need, right? So something I can tell you, looking at every rod in here at the Musky Shop, they're all capable, they're all competent to throw a musky bait, right? It's the old nomenclature of the sport. They would have a line rating on the back side of the rod. There's some rating, X amount of weight. It's appropriate for a lure of X ounces, 2 ounces, 6 ounces, whatever it might be. I don't find that that's beneficial for my fishing, right? If you're going to throw really small stuff, you might need a lighter action rod, but a heavy action rod of pretty much every make and model, with the exception being a Kuma, because their rod ratings are different. We'll talk about that momentarily. A heavy action rod can throw every piece of rubber, every big bait in the store, every musky bait there is. So you can get away with a heavy action rod now, and then build your setup. So if we're just starting, we don't want to feel overwhelmed, or how many rods do I need? By a heavy action rod, it's going to get you done. Am I super happy to throw a Mega Monster Medusa, which is one of the biggest baits in the store on this? No, but in general, if you're going to throw a big Medusa or a Magnum Bulldog, you're going to be great. So you don't need to overthink it. The line rating or the size rating is kind of an antiquated way of looking at things with these rods in some capacity. Some people would argue differently, but that's how I look at it. You take into consideration the action of the rod. So there's tons of different actions, but the nomenclature of musky fishing is heavy, extra heavy, right? You got heavy and extra heavy. Walk with me here. We'll look at some different things here, where the heavy action of a Shield rod and the heavy action of a premium rod here, like from St. Croix, you know, their heavy action, this is the Switchblade, and you know, that's a heavy power. Their heavy power rod is pretty commensurate to all the other brands. So if you're moving up or down, let's say that you're a St. Croix user, or you want to get a St. Croix, you had a Shield rod, now you want a St. Croix, you're going to be kind of on an even keel. So you can be comfortable moving, making a lateral move from one heavy action to another. I would say the one rod company, and it's not a negative or a positive with this, I'd say the one rod company that kind of resides on the outside of that would be a Kuma. A Kuma's actions tend to be a little softer than the other brands. So a heavy action Kuma is going to be far lighter than a heavy action Shield rod, or a heavy action St. Croix rod, or a heavy action Chaos rod. So that's the only thing to consider. A Kuma is a multi-species company, and they do their own style ratings. But you know, a Chaos heavy action rod versus Shield rod versus a St. Croix versus Shimano, you're going to be in the right boat, right? So the main things to consider, starting your hunt for the right rod: the gunnel height of your boat, your physical stature, what's going to be comfortable, and is it going to increase the radius and the depth changes taking place in your figure eight. Don't overthink the bait ratings. Just simply don't. Go with a heavy action rod. You can build your musky arsenal outside of that. As you move on through your musky fishing career, you might want the addition of an extra heavy rod for ripping jumbo, you know, Mega Monster Medusas and some of these jumbo presentations. But a heavy rod is going to get you with your Krakens, all your basic baits. So that's going to really cover what I look at is the core decision we need to make when we're picking out our musky rod, right? So take that in consideration. Look for a rod that's going to do the most for you out of the gate. The other thing, like I said, is storage. Chaos, Musky Shop, and a few other brands offer telescoping rods that are going to fit in your boat, fit in your vehicle, and it's going to help you store these things so you don't have them laying around. Get the longest rod you can get your hands on that fits your physicality and the setup in your boat, and it's going to put more muskies in your net. But if we want to do that, we need a reel. Let's walk over the reels and look at the choices we have to make there, and I'll try to guide you through some of the choices we have to make to put more muskies in your net. All right, you just got your new musky rod. You picked it out. We're going to have to pick the right reel. Just like rods, it's going to be a physical choice in some capacity. So, some of you have seen these, some of you haven't. This is like a 500 series reel. These are big, large frame reels, right? You take in consideration the tranks. That's a 500 series tranks. These are about as big as they get. These are what I would consider, you know, offshore, or not offshore, but, you know, intercoastal application reels as well as musky fishing. So you look in comparison to the Shimano tranks, which this is your standard 400 size, and this is your 500 size reels. Right? Excuse me. I have a 300. So that's the even smaller model there. Here's a 400. So the physical size of these is way different, right? So if you're a palmer, if you like to palm your reel when you're casting, that 500, that's going to be a very large frame for you, whereas the 400 is a much smaller grab, right? So that's going to be a consideration right off the bat. Do you need a very large reel or a small reel as far as frame size? So most companies operate with 3 main sizes. You're going to have 5, 4, and 3. All right. So your 300 size is going to be the smallest. 400 is going to be your mid size, followed by your 500 size, which is your absolute largest frame size. That's also going to influence your spool capacity. So that's our next consideration. We want to pick a rod and a reel that's going to be comfortable for us physically all day, but it's also going to be the right reel for the applications we're fishing. Something I can tell you, it's kind of a myth in musky fishing, is more line is better, right? It's going to be a very rare scenario that you're going to need or ever get into the entire spool capacity of your reel, right? Muskies just simply do not make these grandiose runs. They don't peel drag. It's a short fight. It's usually over pretty quick. So we do not need a tremendous amount of spool capacity. So taking that into consideration, making the decision between, say, a 300 size or a 400 size, you're going to lose some spool capacity with the 300 versus 400, but then when we get into the 500 size, you have maximum spool capacity. For most applications, your 400 size is going to be more than enough spool capacity for any serious musky situation that you're in. For burning bucktails to throwing topwater to big rubber, you're not going to get yourself in trouble by having a smaller frame. Just because the 400 series is the most popular with most of these reels doesn't mean you have to fish one. You can go down to the 300 size and be just as confident and competent on the water as any other reel size. So taking spool size into consideration and the actual frame size and how it fits in your hand, you know, we can look at the gear ratio, right? So you need to find a reel that's going to fit your hand right. We need the right spool capacity, so we want to have enough line on there for casting, trolling, whatever it might be, but we don't need a massive amount. So when it comes to gear ratio, all that simply means, let's look at this, Daiwa. It says 5:1 gear ratio. The spool of this reel is going to rotate 5.1 times for every single handle turn. When your handle turn does a full revolution, that spins 5.1 times. When we have right next to it, this dial is 7.1. Boom. 7.1 turns. So, how do we apply that to proper reel selection? How do we apply it to musky fishing? What I can tell you is this. It is way harder to slow down than speed up. So musky anglers just love to just turn the handle, right? So if you're fishing in warm conditions or burning bucktails or doing something as simple as that, the higher gear ratio is appropriate. The only other thing to consider would be with a higher gear ratio when we're ripping rubber, things of this nature, when we're moving baits and we need to pick up that line, a quicker pickup can be important, but it's not the most important element of your selection. You don't need to pick a reel based solely on gear ratio. You know, and it's kind of important that we select something that's going to be middle of the road most application for most of us. Most guys are not going to have this large assortment of reels in their boat. So the tried and true gear ratio for most muskie applications is going to be 6:3, right? So this is a Daiwa, just grab it. It's a 6:3 gear ratio. Daiwa, Shimano is right there, right in that in between 5.8. Penn has 6.2. That speed is going to get you the most versatility from anything from ripping rubber to straight retrieving topwaters, working Suics, working Titans, jerk baiting up Krakens, things of that nature. That's going to be an appropriate speed for you because that's going to allow for the quick pickup we need with rubber and allow you to still slow down when you're in cold front conditions. It's hard to slow down these higher reels. So what I would tell you when it comes to selecting your reel, the most important factor, number one, is it comfortable in your hand, right? So you might not have the luxury of visiting just the display wall here at the Musky Shop. You can call the pros on the phone and say, hey, you know, I'm X, Y, and Z, I'm this tall, that tall, or I fish, you know, I'm used to fishing big bass reels, or whatever your point of reference is. They're going to be able to guide you to the right reel for your physical stature. Then we need to consider what are we using it for. What I like to think about with some of these reels is, say, a Tranx 500 or some of the super high gear, the Dialexa 500. Those are specialist reels. The rest of your 400 size, your 300 size tend to be your general reels for most applications. So if we're starting musky fishing, we might be a detriment to our fishing if we start with a specialist reel. Let's stick with the core stuff. Your 400 size, your 300 size in a 6:3 ratio, paired with a St. Croix, a shield rod, a chaos rod, whatever fits your physical stature. If you've got a rod that's the right length for your boat, your height, your physicality, and a reel that you can cast comfortably all day long, it's definitely going to put more muskies in your net.
Mute.